All right, folks, it's 5 o'clock, so I will call the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee meeting, January 7, 2020, to order. Today, we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. I'll look to the Deputy Mayor for the adoption of the agenda, and the resolution is that the content of the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee agenda for Tuesday, January 7, 2020 be adopted as presented. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, as we progress through the meeting, please identify it and let us know the general nature thereof. Under item 4, other business, 4.1, Town of Collingwood official plan update. This is a council workshop with the planning partnership with Ron Palmer and Donna Hine. And before we get going, just for the public's information, this is the opening process of what will be a fairly in-depth process, and it will be an iterative one too as it progresses. And so if you're not here today to give us your input, there are certainly ways, both online through Engage Collingwood, and there will be other opportunities as well, I would imagine. So this is just the opening salvo of this workshop. And for those that are here, there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting under item 5 for public delegations. So with that said, I'd like to hand it over then to Ron and Donna to introduce, I don't know, Adam, if you want to say something? Sure. Okay, we'll give it to Adam first to introduce our consultants and give us a perspective on the process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, members of the public watching at home. Tonight we're gathered for a council workshop to discuss the Town of Collingwood official plan update. It's just gotten underway. There were one-on-one meetings with councilors yesterday, and there's this workshop happening tonight. The purpose of the workshop is to provide you with an overview and a status update of the work program in the context of which the official plan is being advanced, and an overview of the public engagement plan. So, although this meeting tonight is a public meeting, the focus is really on you and your thoughts going forward. So we're approaching this, I guess, in a twofold fashion. I'm going to share the delivery of a presentation with our consultants, and then we're going to get into an interactive session to hear about you and your thoughts. So I wanted to introduce our consultants. The last time we met in a public forum on the official plan was in June, when council approved the terms of reference that allowed us to go ahead and issue an RFP, and we selected the planning partnership as our preferred consultant. The planning partnership is a multidisciplinary firm. Planning partnership is a multidisciplinary firm, so it's led by Ron Palmer on this project, and he's the planner, project manager, lead, and Donna Hine is the communications advisor and facilitator. In addition to Ron and Donna, there are also a number of specialist consultants assigned to the project, including a specialist in commercial growth management analysis. That's one of the metrics, a natural heritage consultant, natural heritage and geographic information system specialist. And then there are a number of other specialist consultants as well who will be available to the project in transportation, municipal servicing cultural heritage and architecture and urban design. So within the, I guess the overall plan-making framework, there are a number of roles. There's you as council who are involved in each step, in each phase of the process going forward. You're champions of the official plan. We're interested in the thoughts tonight, and there will be statutory approvals associated with this. So at each phase, you'll be involved, and ultimately when the draft plan comes forward, you'll also be involved with that and associated public meetings. I'll be the town's project manager, working with a larger group of folks. First, with department heads, the CAO and the rest of the team, providing overall project guidance and monitoring. And then we also have a working team within the organization of managers and staff who are providing technical advice in areas of specialty. This also extends to include members of county staff or conservation authority. And then, of course, one of the focal points, this is public engagement. And we're, as you'll see in a few moments, proposing a robust public engagement plan that includes many active and also less active kind of opportunities for the public to be involved through the multiple stages. So when the plan came forward, or the term of reference came forward back in the summer, we identified a 6-phase project, and essentially we stuck to that. The phases include project startup, which is what's happening now. I'll just move through each of these in a little more detail. So this is where we've done the one-on-one conversation with council. We're having this workshop to get your information and thoughts on what we've done so far. We've crafted the skeleton framework of the community engagement plan. We have specialist advice from the planning partnership and what we've prepared so far. And we met with the technical advisory committee early today. Through the rest of the project, there's really 3 key phases. The community visioning component, most of these projects kick off with that dimension. This is not to be confused with the community vision work that's been done on the community-based strategic plan. It's kind of a more principled, more refined level of visioning that's focused on the land use framework and those issues that are central to the official plan, such as urban design and the way people see their neighborhoods building out, how they see themselves working, living, playing, shopping in the future, getting around town. It's a kind of a macro level for the OP. And there's a whole range of public engagement associated with, including pop-up workshops and one-on-one discussions and stakeholder focus groups. And we're just working on fleshing out the details of that right now with a planning partnership and melding our program and the staff support that we have. And then once we move through the visioning phase, we get into issues identification. Well, that's how happening all through the process, of course, but that issues identification stage kind of culminates in a number of discussion papers that set out the issues at play in the community right now. Those issues go on to form directions. So really the solutions that would be proposed through policy and official plan to tackle the different issues that have been raised in the issue stage emerge in the directions stage, and a full report on the directions is produced and basically discussed among a community workshop and some kind of stakeholder engagement. That directions report then moves into a draft plan, and there's several iterations of the draft plan. We have our statutory open house where we advertise the draft plan, which is a requirement of the Planning Act. It's not to be mistaken as a substitute for any of that consultation that's occurred. It's beyond that and fulfills the statutory requirements. At that stage, we would hope to be pretty close to the final version, and the final version will be presented to council for adoption. So this is laid out over the course of the next year. The bulk of the work and effort occurs within 2020, and there's some carryover into the first quarter of 2021. After town council approves the plan, it is not in effect. It has to be approved by the county. It's very important to understand that. It's very important also to understand that any existing official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendment applications that will be influenced by official plan policy that have been proposed right now, proposed before the new official plan is adopted, are governed by the existing official plan. I just need to explain that very clearly, that any new directions from this official plan exercise that would be approved by council are not in effect until the county approves the town's plan. Otherwise, the existing official plan is unaffected. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ron, who will speak a little more to the context.
Thank you, Adam. As I'm sure you're all aware, the preparation of a new official plan and an update to an existing official plan, you are not alone in the decision-making process. You have friends at the province who are going to be very interested in your plan. And we have some very specific direction from the province, not only through the Planning Act, which is the overarching legislation that requires you to do an official plan. We also have the growth plan, which is new. It's the third or fourth iteration, particularly for you folks in Simcoe County. And the new growth plan came out just shortly after the approval of the brand new county official plan. And there's some complications that gives us. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So absolutely in this process, we are required to conform with the 2019 growth plan. This fall, the province was kind enough to deliver Bill 108. And Bill 108 is a kind of an omnibus piece of legislation that amends several pieces of existing legislation that has an impact on land use planning in Ontario. The precept of Bill 108 is to deliver more and more variety in the housing stock across the province. So with respect to how that affects local official plan preparation, absolutely elements of the Heritage Act, the Development Charges Act, and of course the Planning Act will need to be referenced in this document. Of significant importance is how the new Planning Act will impact Section 37 of the Planning Act and Section 42. Section 37 is a new opportunity called the Community Benefits Charge Bylaw. And the requirements for that will unfold over the course of this plan. What's important to remember, though, is that the new Section 37 replaces parts of Section 42, which is no longer in existence. Section 42 is a very important piece of the Planning Act because that's the parkland dedication bylaw. So that is now folded in to new Section 37. It's a bit complicated, a bit technical. It requires some other work to be done by the town of Collingwood to make sure that you continue to get appropriate public open space as well as funding for various community benefits through the development approval process going forward. Excellent. After Bill 108, the province was very kind to produce a draft provincial policy statement, another document that we are required to review and incorporate into all planning documents in the province. Interestingly, the test is not conformity, but consistency with. And we're going to have lots of fun over the next year talking about definitions and words and all those important things. However, what's important to know about the provincial policy statement is that the fundamental changes, while not changing any legislation, do provide a lot more discussion about the impacts of climate change and the idea of affordable housing and housing supply. Excellent. We can't forget the County of Simcoe official plan. Again, it was finally approved after 8 years earlier in 2019. And the key element of that is you are also required to conform with the county official plan. The county official plan allocated growth to to the town of Collingwood, both in terms of employment growth and residential growth, to the year 2031. The new growth plan, which came out about 2 months later, goes to 2041. The new growth plan allocates population and employment growth to the county. And it's the county's job to then subsequently allocate that out to the constituent municipalities. So I call it the dilemma because we are required to conform to both plans. However, we don't have enough information today to incorporate 2041 as the time horizon to this plan, because we don't yet know your population and employment growth allocations, and there are a host of other topics that are important in terms of understanding growth management that will need to be dealt with by the county and then implemented by you through the county's municipal comprehensive review and ultimately an official plan review at the county level. So we've had some preliminary discussions with the county, and what we've agreed is that we will be working collaboratively with the county to talk about growth management that is in the best interest of the town of Collingwood as input into their municipal comprehensive review. It is very likely that this official plan update will be done in advance of the county's municipal comprehensive review and subsequent official plan update. So the goal in our exercise will be to make sure that your plan is ready as the day that the county is ready to change your plan from 2031 to 2041. That means using the correct terminology from the growth plan and all of the other principles and concepts in that plan in your plan, so that the amendment to 2041 is as simple as possible. Again, there's lots of good planning framework elements that are in the growth plan, in the provincial policy statement, and in the county official plan. And our objective is to give you the best of all of it that is appropriate for the town of Collingwood. Next one. You've been busy here in Collingwood. You don't seem to take much of a break. You've been doing a lot of foundational pieces of work that will find their way in some form into the new official plan. This is all terrific and important work that will need to inform us as we work towards a new official plan. You have never stopped. You continue to do work, and the next slide is also work that is currently underway that will also be part of this official plan. So this is a really great opportunity. I've worked in municipalities where we have nothing. And the official plan is first, and the policy framework says, do a master transportation study, do a master servicing plan, do an affordable housing strategy, do. Here, much of the work is ready to go and ready to be implemented through the broader planning framework. So what are we going to be looking at? Well, we're going to be looking at many, many things, but remember that an official plan is really about establishing a land use planning framework that manages growth within this community. That includes a whole host of important elements: natural heritage, housing supply, talking about active transportation and walkability, a whole host of topics, some of which we discussed in our conversations yesterday, but things that are really necessary as part of a comprehensive, up-to-date, state-of-the-art official plan. One of the things that I don't want to underemphasize is that the link between engineering, sewer, water, stormwater management, and transportation elements and land use planning is a fundamental link. And that's going to be an important component of this official plan to make sure that decisions are made that consider the impacts on all of those elements of the plan. things I want to talk about is what an official plan is supposed to be, and what corroborate that is what it's not going to be for you. I don't want to shatter your expectations, but I want to manage the idea that the official plan is really about land use planning, and it's not the panacea to solve every community issue. Some of them are inappropriate in an official plan. Some require official plan policy and also other elements of planning approvals or other elements of council decision-making that make it all work together. So fundamentally, the official plan leads the planning and development approval process. In the province of Ontario, it establishes a policy framework to deal with growth and change and how the town of Collingwood wants to proceed into the future. The official plan, however, is not a standalone transportation study. It's not an affordable housing strategy. It's not a strategic plan. But it works with all of those documents as an implementation tool to help guide staff and council in making good decisions about development. Part of the discussion of what goes in the official plan and what does not is about what needs to be statutory, what needs to be legal in the document, and what should remain outside of that document so that it can be more nimble as implementation occurs over time. So we want to make sure you have the tools to make the best decisions possible, but we don't want to tie your hands in terms of all elements of implementation. So parts of these other studies that feed into the official plan will remain outside of the official plan. Parts of them will be included within it, usually the higher level objectives and principles, except when it comes to land use plan, in which case will be very much more detailed in terms of the policy frameworks.
So we had a terrific day yesterday meeting with each one of you. We were set up in the boardroom from about 9 o'clock in the morning and left shortly after 8 o'clock. It was a fantastic day. I really, really appreciate the time that you gave Ron and I to meet with us. We came away with about 12 pages of very detailed notes, and made just a few, when we squinted our eyes and looked at everything that we had heard during the day, a few observations that we thought that councillors were very positive about Collingwood and its future evolution. We thought that everybody was interested in, sorry, I'm just looking at notes that we made on this, interested in managing and accommodating growth, including finding the most appropriate locations for intensification that was done in a way that was compatible with the existing neighborhoods. We found that everyone was interested in pushing the boundaries on what a healthy, sustainable, active, safe community meant. And that was really exciting for Ron and I to start with that as a basis. That everyone was interested in being a leader in responding to climate change and promoting sustainability. And then we really appreciated the comments you gave us about how to make sure we reached out to the broadest spectrum of the community. Everyone gave us ideas and suggestions for specific groups. And the message that I took away in particular was to make sure that the engagement used a balanced set of tools. Remember the importance of face-to-face conversations while having a robust platform of online engagement. So that was really interesting for us. We went through our notes on what we've learned from staff, went through our initial cursory review of some of the background information, reviewed the terms of reference that provided some direction from the get-go, and came up with a list, and obviously listened carefully to what we heard yesterday, and synthesized it into a bundle of initial issues to consider. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be working with our town staff committee, our technical advisory committee, department heads to hone in on the best way to articulate these issues. But it really addresses the the very broadest scope of how to accommodate new development, housing affordability, attainability, urban design, development, commercial industrial lands, promoting mixed use, protecting natural areas, recognizing cultural heritage, et cetera. It was a fantastic couple of days that helped set this very early thinking on preliminary issues. What I thought might be good for following the agenda, we're just a little bit past 5:25, we'll come back at the end to summarize next steps, is to use this as a bit of a point of departure for the first activity in the workshop. And the first question that I wanted to pose to councillors is to think about these key issues, challenges, itches, however you want to characterize them, and reflect back on what Ron said about what an official plan can and can't do, and talk to us about what you think the official plan needs to do with respect to the issues and challenges that are on the screen or others that you don't think are reflected on the screen yet. So I'm interested in what can we be doing? What do we need to be putting our focus on in the official plan when we look at, for example, how to address housing affordability, attainability, how to protect heritage, how to make sure we're accommodating the full range of mobility options. Anybody, any thoughts? What does the official plan need to do in terms of policy, direction, schedules?
Well, I guess I mentioned this yesterday, one of the issues we discussed was looking at ways to make the application or approval process an interactive one in which the town has an ability to influence the types of developments, form of developments, the design of the developments, and even the carbon footprint of the developments. So to give the municipality an effective role in determining what the key developments are going to look like and where they're going to go as compared to just checking boxes. So through, I guess, incentives, whatever forms those can take, and what kind of tools would be available to the municipality to be as influential as possible in these processes, understanding that we are really a regulator of that process.
Ron, do you have any follow-up to that?
No, it's just for some.
Okay. Anybody else, did you have a thought? No? Anything? And we did, that was a really good point, because we did hear some comments on that during our interviews yesterday. What does the official plan need to do with respect to active transportation, for example? Go to the next slide. Or public spaces. Many of you talked to us about public spaces. Many of you talked to us about intensification and some of the challenges of the forms that we were seeing in town now and the impacts it was having on the immediate neighbors. Yep.
I just wanted to comment on the active transportation component. In fact, I would love to see the requirement for new developments to have to provide the requirement for new development to provide the connecting links for active transportation corridors. And also, I would love to see some kind of active trail network that connects us to our abutting municipalities. We have not only our residents using these, but there seems to be a real weekend road warrior crew who come up on bicycle, and I hear so much about how unsafe it is.
That's terrific, and there are certainly some precedents for systems that extend beyond municipal boundaries, and that's a great suggestion and something that we'll try and bring back some examples of where that's happened. Yep.
I think one of the things we talked about yesterday for me that I hear a a lot about is taking down of good bungalows and wartime homes and attainable housing and replacing it with these huge monstrosity of homes. And because lots of times these smaller places are on large lots, but it doesn't always fit. So what we're doing in terms of our urban design standards, or how we're doing infill development, to me is really important that we maintain the neighborhood character. And however, whatever we do with DOT, we're able to maintain our character and quality of life.
But we certainly heard that many times yesterday, that however you describe that small town character, that everybody mentioned how important that was as the foundation for anything that was done. So that's a really important point. How can we make sure that it's compatible with the neighborhood? Doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be exactly the same, but how can it be the right scale and character and form? Yep. Johnson.
It's a comment and a question, and it's not intended to come across as pessimistic, but it will sound as such. And that is that when I walked away from our conversation yesterday, and in particular looking at the overall, the aerial view of the community, and we talked about this in our discussion of the fact that the province didn't change the boundary of the town of Collingwood. And as a county councillor, I was bracing myself for a significant change. I thought we would have seen a part of Fairview Township become part of Collingwood. The 6th Street, for example, is a prime example. So with that, I think it would be helpful, because when I walked away, I started to think about the map as it stands today. And Ron, your comment earlier tonight about the plan that is in place for 2031 versus what's now been at the provincial level coming for 2041. And having seen recent presentations, Mark Ryan's was an excellent one, for example, to a different professional community, the amount of development that is already in some way, shape, or form in the pipe under the current official plan, and then overlaying that with lands that, for one reason or another, whether they be environmental, EP, different uses that are not developable. And all of a sudden, it really changes the conversation, because when we talk about intensification, it's not intensification about 2 and 3 stories and putting something under a single family. It's now we're talking about very real conversations around 10-story buildings to meet those targets. So the question would be, I guess, if we as a council could get maybe a document that provides sort of that overlay as it relates to current boundaries. Because I think then it would change our thought process in terms of what we really can do with a new official plan, knowing what potentially is already approved under an existing official plan.
That's a really good point, and part of our job here is to understand the current potential of approved anticipated development to 2031. And also to pose some options for how growth will be accommodated to 2041, because we know you're a growth center, and the county of Simcoe has been allocated significant growth, both from a population and employment perspective. And Collingwood has a significant role to play in accommodating that growth. So part of our, let's call it a land budget analysis, will be to understand what's existing in the pipeline, what lands are left that might be developable in the future, and whether or not the resulting capacity of existing Collingwood is appropriate for anticipated growth. Because we have decisions to make about greenfield development and also about intensification. And there has to be an appropriate balance. And we have to understand the impact of intensification forms throughout the community. Where should they go? What should they be? And at the end of the day, what kind of heights and densities are we looking at? This happens as part of the process. Unfortunately, we don't know what your 2041 allocation is, but we can make some guesses. And we'll be using those estimated scenarios to test the urban structure and the capacity of Collingwood to accommodate change. So the short answer is yes.
So just if I can add, I mean, the Deputy Mayor's point is really, really important. And if you take a look at the presentation that we did before we welcome an operations committee next week, the master servicing plan, it has a couple of maps in there that actually is quite telling. It does actually show the urban envelope, and it also juxtaposes on that urban envelope the pending applications that potentially developmental. I mean, I'd encourage council to take a look at it before the development and operations committee meeting next Monday, but it does speak to the point that Deputy Mayor is referring to.
So sort of follow-up comment. So my first was pessimistic, this will sound arrogant. And the arrogance is that we know, because of what we have to offer in terms of mountain water, et cetera, that 2041, regardless of whatever population the province dictates, the people are coming. We're in an enviable position where we know they are coming. It's not a sitting around wondering, can we attract them? They're coming. The arrogance is the
And it's, to be fair, it's time to start thinking of yourself that way. You are an attractor. And that has implications on how you deal with development. It's a different mindset.
very good.
Any other thoughts you'd like to share on what the official plan should do with respect to any of these preliminary issues that we've had a crack at crafting, or ones that are not reflected on here? Councilor McLeod? Okay.
So I have a question actually that, in light of Deputy Mayor Hall's suggestion regarding pessimism also is pessimistic. What sort of accountability gets built into a thing like an official plan? Because when I reread it in advance of our meetings, I noticed a couple of things in there that, for example, a long discussion about an arts center, or not a long discussion, but there was discussion of an arts center. And I know this plan was created in 2009, I think, and no movement has taken place on that. It's now 2020. So I wonder, irrespective of what we do today, if future councils don't follow up on what we choose, what's the ramifications thereof?
Shed some light on that.
Well, that's a really interesting question, and that it's really about how would the municipality like to hold itself to account. And again, we're going to be having conversations about that as we go through the process. Again, we will be talking about whether or not to compel or incent the private sector. So think of yourself as how much do you want to compel yourself? That's a very important conversation to have. And accountability on implementation is important. But it has to be balanced against the realities of what you can do. So yes, it'll be a conversation we have all the way through the process.
Thanks, Ron. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question that we've tabled on the agenda, and that has to do with the vision statement. We know that the town has been very busy working on its community-based strategic plan. And in front of each of you is a copy of the draft vision as it's been crafted as of the end of December 2019. We wanted to use the work that's already been done as a point of departure for a vision statement that also has to be included in the first chapter of the official plan. And the vision, as you know, it's a word picture that describes an aspirational future of Collingwood. So we thought as a point of departure, we would start from the work that's already been done. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on other words or phrases that should be captured in a vision statement to particularly for the official plan. And you may say to me, these two paragraphs are perfect the way they are, but talk to us about, like I said, words or phrases that you think we might need to add. Yes.
I guess the only thing that I'm not seeing here is some overt acknowledgement to our climate crisis declaration and all of our greening initiatives. I know it is implied by a lot of these elements, but I think it needs to be more overt.
Do you have any feedback on that? Yeah, very good. Anybody else? Yeah, Councilman.
One thing that's always on my mind is we see as our commercial retail sector in particular grows, is we're starting to get more chains and they have their own brands, and I'm wondering if part of our vision could be to ensure we have attractive streetscapes for which we would be making suggestions.
Perfect. Anybody else? Yeah.
And I suppose this will be a comment to you, and also just to ask Councillor Hamlin to elaborate. So we had that discussion last night in regard to the urban design guidelines, and that we really do need to do a refresh on those. And my thinking was that in fact, if we do a robust refresh on our urban design guidelines, that we would accomplish that, that we would urge or promote and sort of a more made in Collingwood physical presence for those chains that may be attracted to our community from a commercial standpoint. The other thing is, and again, this is reflective of something that we spoke about last night, that commercial and in particular retail is in a state of flux right now, and I am concerned that we don't have too much land specifically designated for commercial / retail applications, because we may find that we don't need them anymore.
Very good point. I want to get Ron just to weigh in on that just a tiny bit.
That means give you the short answer first. Yes, you're right. Retail changes dramatically, and it is changing again. We've been anticipating a change based on online shopping for about 10 years, and now the momentum is building. So there is likely to be a substantial impact on bricks and mortar retail. And we need to understand it and plan for it. And the good news is we have one of the top retail consultants on our team.
Okay, anybody else, any input on that vision statement, the foundational vision statement, and any words or phrases that might need to be added to that? What we're thinking, and we're going to come back to the community consultation at the end of this workshop, is that we would take this slightly modified draft vision, so the community-based strategic plans vision augmented with some of these words and phrases we've just talked about, and we'd have a similar exercise with the community where we'd ask them, now, based on this content, this slightly modified content, do you have any words or phrases that you think are missing in the vision statement. So this is really helpful to help set that stage.
I think it's really important to understand how the vision statement will be used in the official plan. We like to write official plans that start with a vision. Subsequent are a series of principles that are intended to achieve the vision, which are directly linked to the policy framework that follows. The idea being that when you're reading a policy, you can trace it backwards to the principle that is at play and the vision you're attempting to achieve. So it's kind of a vertical integration of thought. And the best official plans, it's a very clear pathway. And the threads that connect the plan together are very clear. So it's important to have a vision statement that is a good one, that can be articulated through principles, and then further defined through policy.
Thanks, Ron. Actually, you used my word in that explanation, but on a planning basis, I guess the word that I would like to see included or utilized somehow is integrated. Having just been over in Japan and Tokyo and many cities that rebuilt themselves after the Second World War, they have mixed use virtually everywhere. So you see throughout town, there is no district or designated downtown core, office core, apartments core. It's very much integrated, and it really works in a population of 26 million. So I think it would be beneficial on a lesser scale to have that same level of integration in our community.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Donna. So the other thing too, that go along the same lines as mixed use is in terms of the vision doesn't, I don't think really speak about being necessary to provide that variety of housing and being an attainable community for all. And I think of things like accessibility and variety of housing. So I don't know what the short words are, but I don't see it coming. There it is.
Ron, can you just give a couple of sentences on mixed use and some of the thoughts we were sharing yesterday?
Sure. The mixing of uses is an inevitability in our society as communities evolve. One of the things that in the more recent official plans that we've been working on is that there is no more commercial hierarchy. There is no more commercial designations. Commercial is permitted and may be regulated by scale, but they all become mixed use, either a mixed use center or a mixed use corridor, which are the fundamental building blocks of your urban structure that is hopefully supported by investment in transit facilities. That's kind of a principle of planning that is a little bit more modern, although it was really the 70s and 80s that started splitting everything apart and making, neighborhood commercial versus downtown commercial versus only residential versus employment area versus all of those things separate. We're moving away from that. We're moving back to the integrated community where you can live, work, shop, go to school, play, go out for dinner, all within a 5 to 10 minute walk. And that is a wonderful thing to do. And it is an amazingly sustainable approach to city planning. Gets people out of the car. Gets people not even thinking about purchasing a car. So everything is connected. All decisions about land use planning, in my mind, are somehow connected to a vision about how you expect your town to be and to function to the year, first of all, 2030, then to 2040. But we also have to be cognizant that Collingwood's still going to be here after 2041. So we don't have to limit ourselves to the time frame of policy. We can think about Collingwood 100 years from now, And what's it gonna be like? What's it gonna be like for your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, so on? So, absolutely, I know we're talking about mixing of uses, and that's kind of gone on to a segue about a whole bunch of other things, but it's an important concept, and it's something that's happening now, and it's something that needs to be recognized and integrated into this plan.
Did you? That all sounds great. But with you talk about, the town of the future is 5-minute walks from your house and so on and so forth, but we already have neighborhoods that there's no way you can walk to or from, or sometimes even within, right? So no one's walking from Georgian Meadows to get their groceries. No one's walking from Lighthouse Point to get their groceries. That's just not going to happen unless we put a grocery store in those neighborhoods. Is that what you're suggesting? Or how does that work,
I
right?
can answer that. Partly. It's an evolution, and it's not gonna happen tomorrow. But, I can tell you, I go to a grocery store once every 3 months. Because I have access to a butcher shop, a bakery, a greengrocer, a dentist, doctors, lawyers. I can do anything within a 5-minute walk of my place. It's a different kind of urbanity. And it has to be thinking about destinations. The distribution of food is a key element. But it's nothing happens tomorrow. That's why we're thinking 2031, 2041 idea. So what do you want to be? My observation as a city planner for the last 35 years is you have to have an aspirational vision. And then you have to put in place the policy framework to get there from here. It's never going to happen unless you allow it to happen. Developers are never going to do what you want unless you tell them what you want. So, again, it's a really good question, because we're going to get, oh, that all sounds fantastic, but that's not the way it works today. Well, of course it's not the way it works today. So, do you want it to change? Then let's make the change happen. And it's going to take a long time.
Yes, Councilor Johnny. Yes, actually, Ron, when you were speaking earlier, you actually mentioned transit. And I'm wondering if that is something else that can be worked into the vision, perhaps as opposed to the word active transportation, which is very important, but alternative transportation network, so that would incorporate public transportation or active transportation as opposed to traditional.
Donna's going to be very happy with my answer on this. Absolutely.
Do you want to follow up on this? Okay. Yes.
And I don't know if this is too granular or not, but touching on Councillor Doherty's comment about active transportation network, and Councillor McLeod's comments about, let's say, our Georgian Meadows community, we know statistically time and time again why children don't walk to school or cyclists don't use their bike, and it's safety. And we talked about safe communities, and we talked about the autonomous movement of children within our communities. So language I see here is an active transportation network that prioritizes the rights and safety of pedestrians and cyclists, that addresses the rights of pedestrians and cyclists and their movements within our active transportation system. So we say here, including an active transportation network that prioritizes the rights and safety of pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah, please. Thank you. It came back to me now. So this is another one of those pessimistic questions, I guess. So we have a lot of development projects kind of on the books in the hopper. And in fact, most of it would account for our growth up to 2031. So by making all these changes and improvements to our official plan, if all of these developments are being governed by the current plan, how are we actually going to affect change? On. Help us.
Well, again, it's not gonna happen overnight. My understanding, however, is that a lot of the draft approvals have been hanging around for a while. So, in the Planning Act, draft approval lapses. So, potentially, and I'm not saying this is something you would do in every aspect, but don't renew it. And make them subject to the new policy regime. And in fact, it can be a positive thing for some development applications, because maybe they came in before minimum density requirements were in the growth plan. So perhaps they would like to intensify their neighborhood through another application for draft plan approval. There's a perfect trade-off. Do what we are asking for in our updated policy regime, and we'll talk about enhancing the density of again, there's nothing wrong with being pessimistic, because in part that's being pragmatic. But again, you've got to give yourself the tools to deal with the concerns. I worked in municipalities that have 1,000 draft plan approved units, and their growth allocation is 200. So the goal is, how do you deal with those old approved units? And either get rid of them and start over, or at least have an opportunity to negotiate something better through the draft plan process. And you have that chance. I'm assuming that the county would need to be involved in that. Are they the draft plan approval, or do we do that? But then there you go, it's in your hands.
Any other thoughts on the vision statement? Okay, I'm going to move on now to another really important component of the official plan that is set out early on in the document, and those are the guiding principles. And the guiding principles set policy direction for key subject areas in the official plan document. We've listed 10 subject areas. Guiding principles are very important. They nest under the overarching vision statement, but they let us set some key direction for particular topics. And so what I wanted to do was go through each one of these 10 topics, almost like a lightning rod, not lightning round, and get your thoughts again on keywords or phrases that you think should be reflected in statements of principles with respect to each one of those topics. So for example, when we talk about where people live, many of you talked yesterday about what was really important for you in protecting great, healthy neighborhoods for people to live. So I wonder if we can just go around the table person by person and just fire off a word or a phrase, and we'll spend a few minutes on each one of the 10 topics, and we'll start with where people live. And can we start up here in the corner? Perfect. So where people live, principles, what's elemental to directing policy for where people live?
You know, it's, my answer here is not so much where, it's how. And we talked a bit about this yesterday, and I think we're seeing this in our community's participation in the environmental movements, like the ability to build in ways that we can encourage people to live in homes that are zero carbon footprint, that draw less on our processed water, refined water, by capturing storm water and flush the toilet and do the laundry. I'd like to look at ways that we can be a very environmentally sustainable by allowing developers and enabling our residents to put services in their homes that don't draw on municipal services.
So we're looking at the very first one here, right? What is important to consider with respect to where people live? I would say accessibility to services.
Okay, and services, do you mean community services or municipal services, sewer, water? Do you mean recreation services or community services?
Non-infrastructure, I would make that as a given, actually, but services being transportation services, after transportation services, which will get them accessibility to those other things.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So Jordy, words or phrases about where people live, what's important for you? Come on, okay, thanks.
I have that in the eye.
Where people live,
Programs are
healthy
great.
neighborhood, protecting established neighborhoods,
Yeah.
commenting on new places in general.
Well, I think I already mentioned that in my other comments, so I won't duplicate, but I do think in terms of accessibility, of our community, we've done very well in terms of that accessibility portfolio for people who live here. And, inclusivity and just attainable, it's just really important for me that, people can find somewhere to live.
Inclusivity is a great word. Yeah. Yeah.
Typically, I love word games. I've written down two words that mean the same thing to me. One is appropriate and one is Collingwood. In that, in my head, there is an appropriate place for anybody that wants to live in Collingwood to live in Collingwood.
That's great. Yeah.
I'm going to steal the mayor's word from earlier, integrated choice, or integrated. So again, that if somebody is looking at area A, B, C, or D, whatever their price, whatever their reason, whatever their needs or wants, there's an integrated option for them.
So there's choice.
There's choice.
There's a broad
That's
range.
probably a better word. Let's go with choice.
I like integrated.
It's inclusive.
And the word that comes to mind is simply sidewalks, sidewalks,
Okay.
walkability, safe routes to school.
Okay. The next one is about, the next topic, subject area is how to protect the natural environment, natural features, natural heritage system. Start here again. What's really important?
We talked a bit about this yesterday. What I'd like to see is the ability in approval processes to look at the carbon footprint of a potential development and to make requirements about offsets or ways that not only the impacts or the carbon footprint of the building but actually operating the building can be factored in to allow us to work towards reducing our carbon footprint and maintaining our natural environment.
I would echo those. I would say, I would love to see a little emphasis on our tree canopy being enhanced.
Restrictions.
Restrictions, okay, yes. Okay. Jeffrey, Don? Natural heritage systems.
No, I think it's just an understanding of our residents and the direct relationship from the decisions they make or the things they'd like to see and how it impacts our ability for clean air, clean water, everything we do in our residences that impact that.
Okay.
Foresight.
Foresight, okay. Other side of the table? From here?
promote and use, people will inherently protect their own cultural environment.
Good, okay.
I'll offer the counterpoint to Councillor Doherty, so she said restrictions, I'll offer up incentives, with keen incentives to our developers, and of course the emphasis on trees that are carbon offset.
Another category, another topic area to be addressed in the official plan is about community facilities, services, events, the whole category of element that's important in the community. So I'd like to know, top of mind, what's important with respect to the provision of community facilities, community services, stages for daily events, stages for massive celebrations, what's important for us to think about. Want to go the opposite way? Just scatter? Yep.
A robust community benefits policy,
Okay.
so that every new development is providing for the kinds of services and amenities that those new people are going to need, the whole community is going to need to have a well-rounded life in Collingwood.
Yes.
I guess just identifying the spaces, the appropriate spaces and places that it still connects the community, but I just have to plan ahead, I guess.
Okay.
So I'll say feasibility because I'm thinking of the feasibility study work that I've undertaken for an art center. So in my head, it's knowing what we need before we go ahead and do things.
The second one was feasibility?
Feasibility.
Okay. Other thoughts? Community facilities, services, amenities?
I would add consultation to that,
Yeah, yeah.
which sort of echoes what Councillor Burnham was saying.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one, how to protect Collingwood's heritage. So it's a phenomenal resource, very lucky. So what guiding principles set the frame for the heritage policies in the official plan?
When you say heritage, do you mean natural heritage or do you mean cultural heritage?
Yeah, we're switching the focus to cultural heritage, buildings, landmarks.
I'm not sure if this isn't more zoning, but to encourage an expansion of the heritage district.
If I can pick up on that, I guess what I'd like to see is protect and promote the economy there, because I like to see, I think we need a pragmatic approach to making sure that we can promote our heritage, but also allow for its repurpose and reuse. I don't want us to paint ourselves into a corner where it becomes, I think, financially restrictive to someone to undertake that use of a heritage building. So I'd like to see us look at ways that we can expand our flexibility so that we're not getting into discussions about financial feasibility and trying to preserve an essential building to the point where it just doesn't get done. And we're confronted with that right now, Victoria Hennings. So I think we need to inject some flexibility into the dialogue.
Okay. Heritage, yep, built heritage.
I such strict policies of adherement that we create faux heritage. And you can see that in certain places within the community that instead of allowing for creativity, inspiration from today, we are prescribing the look and feel of 100 years ago. And you can pick out authenticity and Disneyland.
Authenticity is great.
Yeah. Well said. Anybody else built heritage, natural heritage? There will be a significant chapter in the official plan that deals with policy direction for parks and open spaces. So thoughts embedded in a guiding principle with respect to parks and open spaces in Collingwood.
So, and this would be picking up from our conversation last night, but, no acceptance of cash in lieu of parkland under any circumstances, and, along with that, I guess, an expanded definition of what, or a relaxed definition of what a park is, so that a park can be, as simple as a relatively small piece of green space with no amenities, just green space. So I think I hear you talking about the need for a broad range of park spaces, from tiny spaces to big community spaces. And just elaborate on the, what do you think the implication is of accepting cash in lieu? Just explore, just expand on that. I think we know from our conversation last night, but I want everybody to hear.
So, and we've had this come up recently where a relatively small development, the notion was that 5% in this case would not yield a significant enough park that it made more sense for cash to be taken, and then the municipality could apply that cash to a larger park sometime in the future, whereas that small park, whatever it may have been, still has value because it still is green space, it still is recreational area, it is still an enhanced canopy. It's all of those things.
And what it does is it also creates a focus, a neighborhood focus for that area. No matter how small the neighborhood is, it creates a tiny focus for that area. Green space has a tremendous role in providing neighborhood focus. Can you elaborate just a little bit about the role of parks? Huh?
Parks are great. Parks are necessary. Modern community design really talks about the need for parks and how far or how long it takes to walk to a park. Every community needs to have facilities available within walking distance. The typical planning framework is a neighborhood park within 5-minute walk of everybody in the neighborhood. It does get a bit more fine-grained when the scale gets smaller. Some urban, we call them pocket parks, really are trying to serve people within about 2.5-minute walk. Second part about how to distribute parks is land is an important resource, and this goes to your not accepting cash in lieu. And eventually that's going away with Bill 108, but nonetheless, it's an important conversation. It should be land bank. Get the land. Because that's an appreciating resource. Cash in the bank doesn't necessarily go up in value as much as a piece of property. And a lot is a perfectly usable piece of public open space. Another element is it doesn't necessarily have to be publicly owned. The concept of a privately owned public space is becoming a much more common approach to achieving a very fine-grained park system, particularly in areas like a downtown or intensification zone. And that really just allows the owner to retain ownership, for example, if it's on top of a parking garage or something like that. But there are rules about public access, maintenance protocols, design protocols. So, again, there's a whole world of opportunity for a really robust and fantastic open space network that should be linked with your fantastic trails network and should be in every neighborhood.
So, yep, principles
No,
for parks and open space.
I would just think that Councillor Doherty's comments maybe lead to a much bigger discussion, because I know in Collingwood, we have gone from where we had the neighborhood parks and, you know, every neighborhood had a park, and then we went to trying to build bigger, more use for the neighborhood, so you needed more space. But it was found that the smaller ones were a lot more expensive to carry and maintain, and rather than doing a real poor job with a lot of small ones, we could do a really good job with more, still maintaining that walkability for parks for people in the neighborhood. So I think it does lead to a bigger conversation, and it's just not connecting to trails. Those trails are linear parks. So I think that it's how we join our parks to our linear parks.
And I think also what you're talking about is this broadening the definition of parks that could include linear parks that have trails as part of
Yeah, and ours already does include that, I believe.
Perfect. Other words or phrases that guiding principles for parks and open space in Collingwood. When you think about the waterfront, many of you talked about the importance of the waterfront yesterday and the extent from edge to edge of the municipality. And I learned about the importance of the waterfront and connecting it back into the urban core that many of you talked about. That was a very important ambition. So that's the kind of thing that could be embedded in a statement of principle around parks and open space. Let's move on to another category, where to shop. So where do you, the official plan will deal with in some way commercial retail activity. So talk to us about important things, important words to be reflected in statement of principles about shopping and services that are provided.
Well, I like the discussion about integrated. So you live where you shop. And when Calbrook was doing the waterfront master plan, he looked at here Ontario Street and mentioned how we have stores on the ground floor and living accommodations above. And said we should be trying to encourage that along First Street, making the mixed uses so that you can have a ground floor retail, maybe office space, second floor, and then third floor, fourth floors, apartments or condos, so that you're integrating everything. And to me, where to shop, it goes, I think, partly to Councilor McLeod's comment, where to shop should be where we live, to the extent that we can encourage that so that people walk out the door and they can go and get a carton of milk and a haircut and whatever accessories there are. And that's really, I think, the backbone of concept of the complete communities, is making sure that they're integrated. So you don't have to get in the car and go to a specific downtown store. You can go out the door and get on your bike or walk on the trail and go to those stores in your area. So to me, where to shop should be where we live.
The notion of the complete community. Anybody else, where you shop, what's important? Yeah.
I really struggle with this only in the context of as a smaller urban community and a very diverse community from an economic standpoint, we've seen a real change within our, particularly within our retail, that is more geared to one demographic from a financial standpoint. And I hear it more and more from people that are saying to me, and these are people who are maybe my age and younger, that they love to live here, but they can't afford to shop here. And so I think we have to be mindful of how prescriptive we are in terms of the who, what, and where and why. terms of retail. Because if we're not careful, we will very quickly start to cater to one without thinking of the other. And for a healthy community, you need a clear cross section.
Any other thoughts? Yep, go ahead.
Thanks. And this is more of a question, and maybe it's even a question that we don't answer tonight. But and I've been struggling with this in my own mind because we do want complete neighborhoods so that immediate, most important amenities are available. But saying that, when do you have such a diffusion or disbursement of shopping or retail opportunities that you have no critical mass anywhere? And thus, as an example, your downtown core, your most important retail section of town is threatened. Where, how do you answer that question? How do you plan for that?
Well, first of all, I would say your downtown core is not your retail center anymore. I say your downtown core is a diverse area that includes retail and service commercial uses, restaurants, financial institutions, which are service commercial. It's much more diverse. The critical mass of straight-on retail is not downtown anymore. That doesn't mean that it's not a great downtown. It just means it's a more diverse place than an agglomeration of larger format retail and pad stores out on the highway. There's a role for all of that. And we're not going to legislate anything out of existence. You need retail. The good news is that you're, as a service center for quite a large area, notwithstanding Wasaga Beach is right next door, but you're a service center that serves a rural community of a significant scale. And you have retail that is probably bigger than just Collingwood. So you've collected retail activity, which is a good thing. That's part of being complete. You do have a cross-section of types of retail, scales of retail, and locations for retail. That's a good thing. We're not going to be legislating anybody out of that. That's a positive aspect of this community today. We want to make sure that you can continue to evolve retail as retail evolves.
Yep.
The question has nothing to do with shopping.
Okay.
But I sort of was curious as it relates to some of the things we've already touched
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
The largest landowner, so the question is in the context of, does the official plan have any bearing on, and can we do anything about it? One of the largest landowners in our community is the education system, private or Catholic, separate, or public, private, or Catholic. So when we talk about things like active transportation, but we've got buses with 10 kids coming from one side of town to the other, or we've got kids that are going to one school because it's only one school, and can't walk or can't bike, because again, they're coming from such huge advantages within the community that their parents are compelled to drive them. Are there things that we can be doing within the OP to encourage our education system to sort of change their mindset? And the second part is that for anybody my age or older, when you were a child, the schoolyard, 365 days, was public access. It was a public park. And oftentimes we had a public skating rink, we had tennis courts. We don't have that now because of insurance. And is there a way to, and in fact, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is that they themselves are building out as opposed to up, and are in fact actually killing the open space.
The short answer is yes. the longer answer is, but it's really difficult to get school boards to start thinking urban. They used to build 2 and 3 story schools with a 2-acre site with a attached park. But they don't do that anymore, and it's odd because the provincial government, who is a fundamental promoter of intensification, hasn't told them yet that they have a role to play in an urban community. And it's a different role than in the middle of the suburbs of Mississauga. It's not the same. So we can talk about policy and how to deal with school boards, but at the end of the day, they have their list, and we've got to get them to change their list of requirements for schools. It's not impossible, but it's work and significant amount of pressure that would be required. I don't know what your relationship with the school boards are on individual properties that are identified as surplus. Do you have first right of refusal? So that's a positive thing, is if they do become surplus, then at least you have the opportunity to do some planning about what they become. And that may include park space, community space, opportunities for forms of housing that would be integrated into the community, including some higher density development. So that's a positive thing. The goal is to get the new schools to be urban and not suburban. And, you know, I've been working on that with the province for 10 years, and it hasn't been going up. But it's not, that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
I'm gonna switch. Did you have something you wanted to talk about? Shopping, retail, services? Okay, I'm gonna switch to jobs and economy, robust economy. Thoughts on the words for principles for jobs, economy, employment, however you wanna frame that. So this is aspirations that could direct the detailed policy development for jobs, employment plans, economy.
Yeah, so I think this is maybe a question to you.
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday when Claims identified us as the 22nd best community living in Canada. They came up with a statistic that 66% of our workforce work in Collingwood. And that's an incredible circle economy that we'd like to continue with. When you compare us to Tech, that was, I think, ranked 5th. They're 60% of their residents leave town for work. So, and I guess I'm looking, and as part of the active development plan, what tools are available to us to put into the official plan that can encourage that or sustain it and promote it moving forward.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, I really liked the concept of live-work situation, not necessarily live shop, but live work, whatever those services may be. And I know we did have it in existence for a bit in the shipyard plan, but then deviated away from that in light of some other input. But I really do think that live work is a really sustainable way to, especially with the numbers we have in terms of people creating their own jobs through something.
Okay, and there are some great models of that in new communities in Markham and Oakville and Port Credit. Developers of the shipyards, they have a great example of that. Good point. Anything else on employment lens? Yep. Okay.
No, it's a fantastic thing that you have such a high proportion of people who live and work in this community. Very good thing for sustainability, and a great thing for quality of life. It's wonderful. I haven't read the economic development strategy yet, so I'm going to have to read that in detail to understand where you're going. You know, the historic approach to economic development was, we're going to attract Toyota, and we need 300 acres of greenfield land that's shovel ready tomorrow, and then it sits there for 40 years, and then you say, well, what should we do with it now? We deal with this in many municipalities who are shifting from an industrial history to the new economy, which is a different way of attracting development. Goes back to some of the things you said about integration and mixing of uses, because many of the new economy job drivers are totally acceptable uses within a mixed residential, commercial, industrial landscape. So I need to understand better what your economic development strategy is asking you to do, and what kind of employment you're trying to attract. You still have a legacy of industrial development that is functioning well. So are you going to be building on that? Are you switching gears? Or are you doing a little bit of everything?
Yeah, yes, without preempting, because the plan's still in process, I think it's recognizing and trying to protect and enable our existing larger scale, like Pilkington and Canadian Mist. But I think we see in our future, we're talking about Tech Hub North, which is sort of gray matter expertise with engineering firms. We're talking about the Center of Water Excellence and a potential accelerator incubator in town to do that. And really we're building on our entrepreneurial, incredible entrepreneurial base. And I think really that's what grew out of the closing of the shipyards. If you wanted to stay here, you had to make your own job. So I think really we're looking at the more boutique and smaller employers, Egnor Glass, Side Launch, Collingwood Brewery, Airtech Distilleries, SensorTech, I mean, we can list a whole bunch, and we're also getting high-tech companies with Jack, Switch Video, all that sort of stuff. So I think, I guess, in my mind, the way I see it kind of going is if you drive down Hume Street, when I came to Collingwood 17 years ago, Hume Street was residential. And now it's much more integrated with commercial, office space, and residential.
So I look forward to seeing the economic strategy and trying to work with that into the broader scheme of things.
Let's talk about moving around the town of Collingwood, and every single one of you had some ideas to share about transportation in and through Collingwood. So again, just give me some words, active or how to move around.
Would you like to
So moving around Collingwood, what's important and what should be again reflected in a high level direction for the policies around transportation, moving around, yeah.
Multimodal, safe, and multimodal. And ubiquitous, as opposed to only certain roads will accommodate.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that question has two parts to it. It's how local people move around and how people who are coming here as we try our tourism,
Okay.
economic development are moving around. So I think we have two considerations there.
Okay.
But it needs to be convenient, timely, affordable.
Anybody else? Moving around Collingwood. We've got multimodal, safe, ubiquitous, convenient, timely, affordable. Yep.
Actually, I think maybe we could add green.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously people will move around town in a variety of different ways, but let's encourage them to move around town in ways that are environmentally sustainable. So skew to active transportation, public transportation, etc.
Yep.
Our active transportation framework touches on this term. It's really popular. I think there's a whole group in Toronto called it 880. It's the idea that any and all active transportation could be safely and easily accessed by an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old independently.
880. So then the final two address climate change, and I'm gonna put sustainable development in that as well. And I know we've touched on this already, but just, I think we started with some ideas about zero carbon footprint, using less water, being more environmentally sustainable. Is there any other thoughts you want to leave us with respect to climate change, guarding against climate change and sustainable development?
Protecting our natural heritage, our, I'm struggling with the right words, but absolutely protecting our wetlands as an example, because they are a huge absorber of stormwater runoff.
Great. Yep.
There's a lot of discussion in the current plan regarding cooperation with the Conservation Authority and leveraging their expertise, and I think that ought to stay. It can be enhanced. That would be, I think, wise. I think we're going to find out more about that in the regulations of Bill 108 as well, but
And we know, we learned from many of you yesterday about the very active group in the municipality around climate change and the participation of youth in that group, which is very exciting.
So I guess I was just gonna tug at the sustainable development idea. I think that's a much broader topic. The environment is one aspect of it, and I think, to me, it's a very critical aspect of the entire official plan because it goes to so much of what we've been talking about. So sustainable, there's social sustainability, which goes to inclusiveness and accessibility for all income levels. So housing inventory and affordability, and then economic sustainability, which ties into your robust economy, but also affordability, I think, and then cultural sustainability, which looks at community facilities. And so sustainable development to me is a huge piece of this official plan, and I think the direction that we want to head in the community.
The mayor's initiative in terms of the council's approval of the UN Habitat Sustainable Goal Development, I think it's really important to be able to anticipate through the OP review anything that will assist us in achieving those goals or any other UN goals.
So that is a lot of very useful input on the guiding principles for policy direction of specific components of the official plan. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to switch and wrap up with sharing some thoughts on our approach to community engagement. And while I'm going through these few slides, I want you to think about the very last exercise that I'm going to ask you, and then Adam's going to wrap up with next steps. While I'm going through community engagement, I want you to complete the sentence that is, wouldn't it be great if the official plan could, ... Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could? I'm going to go ask each councillor to complete that sentence for us as a final activity. So community engagement, public engagement, we understand it is very important for the official plan review. It is in fact foundational. We know that Collingwood has done a terrific job in engaging the community on many of the projects that Ron had up on the slide earlier. You've got the terrific Engage Collingwood platform. So I want you to know that starting out for us, the guiding principles, and for Collingwood as well, is that our engagement is founded on principles of being inclusive, being voluntary, of always having respectful forums, of us being adaptive. I can't tell you how many times that despite our best intentions of laying everything out in a community engagement plan on day one of our projects, that we are very nimble and flexible, and we will do a full stop and reconsider how we're engaging the community if we don't think that it's working. We will be accountable to share with you the metrics, how many people we've talked to, how many forums, tools, tactics have we used, what have people been saying. For us, it's really important to continue to report on what we've heard. And then to be responsible. We will be responsible getting back to people when they reach out to us, responsible in reporting out on what we're hearing. The philosophy of our approach is that we will be clear and consistent in our communication, that we will absolutely propose multiple forums for people to be involved, that we think it's really important to build support incrementally, and that's why it's important to have involvement in every phase. So we can go faster or slow down if we don't think we're building in incremental support for the decision-making milestones in each one of the phases. That will target activities depending on the decisions that we have to make in each phase. So a consultation that we do in phase 1 or 2 may be different than the consultation that we do in phase 5 or 6. That we know we are completely prepared to address and consider the varied opinions on the topic of the official plan and what it has to address in Collingwood. That we'll do our best to present information in an easily understandable way so that people absolutely understand the choices, the implications of the choices that they're making through this process. That we will review our work in progress, so every time we come present things to the community, it will be work in progress, and we are completely prepared to make modifications or adjustments based on a compilation of everything that we hear. We'll make it clear that there are many inputs to how we make decisions through the official plan. The public is one of those inputs, absolutely, but so is town staff, is another input, our technical advisory committee is another input, council is another input, any other agencies and approving agencies that we have to get feedback on. So it's important from the get-go to present that diagram of the multiple inputs to how decisions are made. We want to make sure that we're fostering small group discussions along the way so that people can hear other opinions that they may not share. So we are proposing a whole host of different tools and tactics to use. We will, of course, set up a project-specific webpage, and work on that is already well underway. We will, of course, have a dedicated email address, as you do for most of your projects. We like to prepare newsletters along the way that can be electronic or old-fashioned hard copies of what we're doing. And it could be that the newsletters aren't standalone for the official plan review, but we could provide updates on the newsletters that the municipality already does that are very well circulated, I understand. We could have topic-based discussions, so topics like on natural heritage or design and development or economic development, where people come together to talk specifically about that topic. We have stakeholder-focused conversations where we learn that the climate action group wants to have a focused conversation on climate action. We could have demographic-based conversations. We heard from many of you how important it is to reach out to the youth. So we could absolutely go to the youth with a specific and particular workbook targeted at getting input from youth or millennials or young families or seniors. We have a couple of public workshops that are planned. The first one we're targeting in February. One-on-one conversations that we've had with council members. The full slate of tools and social media. We'll have council presentations and meetings. We have an online survey planned to validate the results of the first workshop, the February workshop. And then good old-fashioned telephone calls where I like to make sure on projects that I'm involved in that people know that I am available to speak to almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that I put out my cell phone number, and I really welcome people to phone me personally. I can't tell you how many times I've used that tool because I think it's really important that I be available to talk to people when they have burning issues that are really annoying them, where they want to pick away at something, where I think we can help them share information in a way that makes our big community events really meaningful and productive. So, as crazy as that sounds, I think that's an important component of the engagement strategy. any comments on what we're proposing? You shared a lot of ideas yesterday about specific groups. The message that I got yesterday was don't forget how important it is to have face-to-face conversations with people as well as a robust platform online and through social media. And so I am a big proponent of having conversations as a way of sharing information. Anything that you're not saying on the screen, that you've experienced from other projects, that you want to make sure? Yep.
So I guess my question is, in the past, are you able to collect demographic info, so will we know as a council, the average age the person you spoke to, or gender, or any sort of that sort of information to know how successful it was in its approach to reach a range of groups?
On the online survey, absolutely, there are questions at the end. The online survey platform we use, you don't have to sign in to participate in the survey, which we find really increases the participation in the survey, but at the back end of the survey, we have voluntarily that people can provide information, and that kind of information can be provided at the back end. We can also, and I'm hearing it is important, have a mechanism for kind of taking the pulse of that at the public events too, doing a scan and figuring out.
And in our discussion yesterday, we touched on how City of Barrie had a youth component to their official plan review. They had booklets sort of designed for younger people, and I think it's important, and I'm sure all of council shared this, that we reach that younger demographic in this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was a great point yesterday, and it made me reflect back on how we've involved the youth in our project, in our exercises before, and having a purposefully designed workbook for them is a really important tool. We have people in our office that do graphic facilitation for younger kids in elementary school, where we've had workshops, and they'll be talking about ideas, and our guys will cartoon diagram the ideas that they are sharing. And so on the wall, on big flip chart papers, a whole bunch of cartoon depictions of what they're saying are important. And some of the things that Barry did, and we've done in the past specifically for targeting youth, is we would do, for example, show a photograph of an existing neighborhood, and Main Street, an existing employment area, the waterfront, and ask youth to describe the future of those conditions that we're showing. So they're comparing existing to 40 years out, and we would do that either by showing them precedent photographs of other places in the world, or work with them to diagram their ideas of what a different future might be. The one thing that's not on this list that I'm going to talk about quite a lot is having pop-up consultation events as well. And so that, Adam said, it's really important for us to go to where people are, not always to expect that they're going to come to this municipal building to have a community event. So expect to see us at Tim Hortons or at the arena or wherever we think people are hanging out, to go and reach out to her. The grocery store, Loblaws, and we do this regularly. So any previous projects, or the course of a day, we go to the grocery store for an hour, we go to the library for an hour, we go to Tim Hortons for an hour, we go to the arena for an hour, just wherever we need to go to reach as many people as we can. Yes.
It's possible to go to some of the seniors' residences.
Absolutely.
We've been involved in this, a lot of the seniors have
Yeah.
transportation,
Absolutely.
access to the stores.
A really important demographic, absolutely. And we did learn yesterday about the Provis groups that are in town, that there are many, and so we really look forward to reaching out to them as well.
There's also an indoor market.
Okay. Good.
And I know that when we did a community-based strategic plan, we got a lot of participation and information from our summer outdoor market. So it may be a perfect source.
Okay. Indoor market as well, perfect. And we will be providing more detail on the specifics of the engagement activities as we go forward. Before Adam wraps up with the next steps, I do want to just get your response as a closing exercise. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could? So I'm happy to start it.
All right, and it's going to echo what I started. So it's going to, my comment reads as follows. wouldn't it be great if the official plan could enable the town to actively and meaningfully work with developers to shape and influence development to ensure it is consistent with the needs of the community?
Wouldn't it be great, okay, here's the first one, which is a little tongue-in-cheek. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could keep the town exactly the way it was when I was growing up, while also providing a way for my kids to stay here and make a living? My more serious one is, wouldn't it be great if the official plan could provide us with an understandable, accessible path to a future town where people can live, work, and play sustainably, moving around safely in a pleasant, inclusive, natural environment?
Understandable and accessible path.
Accessible path to a future where people can live, work, and play here sustainably, moving around safely in a pleasant and inclusive natural environment.
Okay, perfect. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could?
Capture and reflect the values of our residents.
Okay, very good.
I don't know, mine's out there. Provide a flexible and respectful land use foundation to jettison our vision to maximize the town's ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and contribute to climate change adaptation and support solutions to our other challenges.
So I'm gonna get you to do that one more time. Provide
Provide a flexible and respectful land use foundation
Yeah.
to jettison our vision to maximize the town's ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, contribute to climate change adaptation, and support solutions to our other challenges.
Yes. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could?
To read my own writing, wouldn't it be great if the official plan could set the bar so high that it is used as the example when other municipalities update their official plans?
That's good. Okay. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could?
5 minutes. So, wouldn't it be great if the official plan could ensure that we became the car-centric capital of Canada?
Okay.
You're supposed to do a tongue-in-cheek one first.
Mine would just be simply, wouldn't it be great if the official plan could ensure progressive growth, ensuring that 100 years reflects the values that were established today?
Okay. Wouldn't it be great if the official plan could?
Could simply ensure every neighborhood had sidewalks and a park.
Those are terrific. Thank you very much. Very good. Just want to wrap up. What's next? Oh,
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Donna, and just tell you that as a staff, we're really delighted to have on board as part of our team working on this plan. And I do want to reflect to you that staff is fully involved in this across all departments and have been working to ensure that many of the thoughts and views that you share as well as many of the residents in the community and the proud workers in the town. And so we're working closely with the team, working to make our staff resources available to implement and to develop many of these ideas. Staff across all departments are also developing issues lists for the consulting team to assist them in developing policy based on their experience with the plan right now. I just want to emphasize again that the plan is really trying to capture the vision of the community as it is now in the midst of many changes that have taken place. It's also responding to many of the changes in the plans that have been adopted, for which there have been robust public consultation exercises over the years. there's content in those plans that needs to be in the official plan in order to become worked into development proposals as they come to the town. And we know that this last year has been a significant year of change at the provincial level in terms of the provincial regulatory framework. And according to the Planning Act, the system in Ontario, we need to conform to those policies and make sure that our plan meets those and is contemporary. It's an important tool. And one of the themes that's come up also through this discussion is youth. And I just want to mention again that because the official plan policies take effect in developments can be applied for after the official plan takes effect. Many of the changes are going to be felt most significantly by people 5, 6, 7 years down the line. And so having the youth participation and voice in this is you know how it is to be a young person, you don't think about these things, but in this case, it really has a formative effect on the community in the future. So we're looking forward to that part of the process. As for next steps, we'll be working with Donna, Ron, and their team to work on the development of issues. You'll start to see some public notifications, some communication activities around the upcoming visioning workshop and associated other kind of consultation work. We're staying connected with department heads, and we'll keep you posted throughout, and you'll see us on a regular basis with updates at committee and council. So again, I just wanted to thank you very, very much for this exercise, and it was really worthwhile for me as a member of staff, and I know for sure it's very useful for the consultant team. So thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to add my voice to the thank yous on behalf of council. Thank you to Adam and staff and to Ron for the last 2 days. They say every journey begins with the first step, and this is a very large journey down a linear path. That's Jeffrey, but it's one that's much needed, and we're looking forward. We're very excited about this process. So, and it was very encouraging to see it outlined for the public engagement. So for those watching, we look forward to getting the community involved, and we hope everyone will come out and exercise their voice in the future of our community. And with that being said, I will then look to the audience and see if there's anyone that would like to make comments or dispute about the session we've heard today. This is just the very first step, so there's lots of opportunity, and we look forward to that community engagement. And with that said, oh, yes? So, Becky, can we circulate that? Yes, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, then I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey, what a surprise. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.